So, I'm somewhere with very long red brick old mills and a hell of a lot of rain. So of course I must be in Manchester, but it's not the same Manchester that I'm used to doing videos from. I'm in Manchester now, in New Hampshire, in New England, in the United States. And why have I come here? Well, because I was passing through, but also to see just what it's like and how it compares. So I recently did a big solo road trip around this corner of North America, and I couldn't not stop in Manchester, New Hampshire to check it out. This was a place where they not only copied the English Manchester's cotton-powered industrialisation, but in many ways even surpassed it. I thought it might be fun to compare this place to the place I live, but also to delve into its origin story and see how the two cities really compare from a historical perspective. The story of Manchester in New Hampshire is one repeated again and again with large towns and cities across North America. It's a story of immigrants coming to a new land, seeing opportunity and turning that opportunity into a successful settlement town city, and in the case of Manchester, a part of something much bigger altogether. The top end of the world's largest megalopolis by economic output. Today, Manchester is the most populated place in the States, and this is New England, so there's plenty of familiar places nearby that reflect the old world many of those immigrants left behind. There are a handful of other Manchesters across the US even, including one over here by the sea. But this one is different because it looks like the place it's named after. When those pioneering British-American colonists were busy establishing and naming settlements after places back home, the name is usually where the familiarity started and ended. Here, well, this could be Manchester, England. To understand why, you've got to look further back in the history of the city than you'd think. Of course, like anywhere in North America, this land was once home to an indigenous people that were first devastated by European diseases, enslavement, and then an unstoppable influx of settler colonialists. These were the Pennacook, loosely related to people we today call the Abenaki. Before colonisation, there were tens of thousands of Abenaki living in this region, covering Vermont, New Hampshire, and up into present-day Canada. The Pennacook were mostly focused on the banks of this river, the Merrimack, where they specialised in farming and especially fishing. Using the features of this wide river to their advantage, many permanent Pennacook settlements were established at falls along the river where fish would get caught in late spring trying to make their way upriver. European settlers, mostly from Britain, slowly encroached further and further inland, spreading disease and death and establishing their own settlements. This early map made in 1634 shows this messy coastline full of bays and inlets. Boston is down here, by the way. The river in the middle is the Merrimack. Look along it and you'll find somewhere called Amoskeag. This is the falls that are still there today in Manchester, a short set of rapids that would have trapped many a migrating salmon and made a great place to settle for the locals. In 1722, a white man called John Goffey settled not far from here and built a sawmill. A small town gradually developed, named Derryfield, with the river its highway to economic prosperity. It's such a shame it's raining because this is the Merrimack River and it's absolutely beautiful, much better than the Medlock, by the way. And upstream is the Amoskeag Falls, some rapids basically, which forced the early industrialists in Manchester here to build a canal for obvious reasons to get around the falls. So, as we'll see in a minute, Manchester has here a canal street. The rapids here that once provided prosperity for the indigenous people was now proving an actual physical obstacle to trade boats trying to get further inland and deeper into the state. In 1807, a short canal was cut with a system of locks, allowing vessels to avoid the rapids. It would be a turning point in the history of this settlement. So that canal was built in 1807 by a man
named Samuel Blodgett, or Blodgett, I'm not sure how you say that, who saw it as a way of getting trade up and down the river here without going near those rapids. And he became such an influence in the town that he encouraged it to change its name to Manchester in honour of Manchester, England, the world's first industrialised town. But he wasn't from England, he wasn't from Manchester in England, he was from Massachusetts Bay. He just liked the idea of this part of the world becoming just as industrialised as Manchester.
By 1807, Manchester, all the way back in England, hadn't even reached the peak of its industrial prowess. At this point, still well before the advent of the railway age, Manchester over here was still gathering its industrial pace. Blodgett was impressed by industrialisation taking place in England and proclaimed that one day the spot around the falls here would be the Manchester of America. Now, he never lived to see that vision fulfilled, but in 1810, with some mills already established, the town decided to change the name to honour his vision. It was the building of a huge water-powered cotton spinning mill on the western bank of the river that really kicked off the economic growth of the new Manchester. It would be purchased in 1825 by entrepreneurs from Massachusetts, expanded to 3 mills in 1826, and then incorporated in 1831 as the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company. Eventually, the mill complex became very profitable and Manchester quickly became a company town, drawing in workers from far and wide, including a large number of Irish, Greek, Polish and French Canadian workers. At one point, it was the largest cotton spinning mill in the world. At its height in the 1910s, Amoskeag employed more than 17,000 people. By the end of the 6-day working week, these mill workers could produce a total of 5 million yards of cloth, with 470 miles of cloth being finished each day. Amoskeag quickly became the largest producer of cotton cloth in the world, and in 1873 it became the main supplier of denim used to make Levi jeans. Being a company town, Manchester was designed to keep the thousands of employees happy. It's hard to go on strike when the company runs the place you live as well as work. Everything was designed around the main street, named Elm Street, running next to what was then the canal. During the Civil War of the 1860s, when cotton was no longer coming from the slave plantations of the South, the town began to diversify, making, amongst other things, locomotives, like its namesake was doing back in England. However, by the 1920s, with other mills around the country now providing rival textiles, an economic depression setting in, this strike-free town soon was hit by a series of mass walkouts over pay and working conditions. And soon enough, the company went under.
And what's great is these mills, you can see, are still being used now. They're still full of people working. I don't know what they do. I'll look that up. But yeah, it's a good idea. You get a good idea of what this Manchester was like during industrialisation, the late 19th century. And also, apart from the scale, which is vast and long and huge, there's nothing actually different about these mills compared to the mills in Manchester, or that used to be in Manchester. And that just goes to show that industrialisation was industrialisation everywhere. It kind of just took off. It was utilitarian. It just happened as it needed to happen. And therefore, simple brick buildings do the job. They do the job.
Today, these mills are used much in the same way many are in the UK. Office spaces, storage, small businesses, cafes, and art centres.
And that industrialisation meant that Manchester could grow and grow and grow, so that today it's the most populous place in New Hampshire, with a population of about 100,000 people just within the city. So that's a fifth of Manchester back in England.
In case you're dying to know, here's how the cities match up. Manchester 1, the OG Manchester back in England, has a city area just 10 square miles bigger than what I'm going to call Manchester 2. Manchester 1 has a city population of about 5 times more than Manchester 2, but a wider metropolitan population nearly 7 times bigger. This is reflected in the street layout, the spread of city parks, the number of police stations, schools and other public buildings. More on topic, Manchester 2 has warmer summers but colder winters than Manchester 1. It has more rain but fewer rainy days. They're both left of centre politically, though Manchester, USA is prone to a little drifting to the right every now and again. New Hampshire itself famously a swing state, courted by both sides in presidential elections. Of course, these comparisons are a bit meaningless because, as we've seen, these cities have completely different backstories and contexts. Manchester 1 has more universities but fewer baseball fields. It has 4 rivers running through it, but none are as grand and majestic as the mighty Merrimack cascading down from the mountains. These two cities are similar but also incredibly different, so in retrospect I guess it was kind of nice to see that you can't depend on a blue sky in either of them. So despite the rain when I visited, I really enjoyed exploring this new Manchester. Elm Street was lively and nearby Hanover Street was nicely lit and very beautiful. I managed to visit the Veterans Memorial Park and then mosey around the housing nearby. On the surface, the similarities between the two cities really starts and ends with the cotton mills. These are otherwise two very different places. But it is really fascinating to see how alike they are, to discover those little coincidences and quirks that tie the two together. How their stories converge around cotton and then diversification. How they learnt to adapt, to rebel and to become focal points for creative freedom.
And the industrialness didn't stop there. This is a statue to Ralph Bayer, a German Jewish immigrant who came to the United States to avoid the horrors of the Holocaust. In the 1960s, he invented a brown box, or the brown box as it became known. It was a way of interacting with a TV screen.
You select the appropriate programming card, and with the tennis game card in position, on the screen appears the net and 2 squares representing the players. Right, Wimbledon, here we come. You ready, Jen? Play.
The brown box evolved into what was the Magnavox Odyssey, the world's first interactive gaming device. In other words, this guy invented the video game.
Oof, so much for tennis. But now, if you're a bad loser and feel like shooting your opponent, you can always take to rifle practice.
All in all, I really liked my flying visit to Manchester, New Hampshire, and wished I'd spent more than half a day exploring the city. In an ideal world, it would have been fun to explore the mills in further detail, go to the falls up close, look at the remains of the early town and the wider city away from the downtown. Like the Manchester back home, this felt like a real place with so much history on every corner and a real positive energy.
And there you go, that is Manchester, New Hampshire. And I'm very sorry it's such a rainy day, because you can tell this is going to be absolutely gorgeous. And yesterday, actually driving here through Vermont and north of New Hampshire, it was a beautiful sunny day, and all the foliage of the end of, or the start of autumn was just beautiful, vibrant, crisp. It was amazing. And today's the opposite, so my apologies for that. And it's such a shame, because I know that I would just love standing, looking at this river here, taking in the history and taking in just the beauty. Maybe not the highway noise, but that's America, isn't it? But yeah, that's it from Manchester, New Hampshire. What a lovely place, beautiful place, lots to see and do. On a day like today, maybe find something indoors to do. But the people here that I've met have been absolutely some of the friendliest I've ever met. So 10 out of 10 for Manchester, New Hampshire. I'll see you back in the old country in another Manchester, another rainy Manchester that we're more familiar with. I'm absolutely drenched now, by the way, from head to toe. But it's all right, because I'm from Manchester in England. I'm used to it. We got this, man.